welcome to the training webinar for this week. I'm Dale Franks, and this week we're going to talk about a rather complex process setup. Automation is sort of the key feature and benefit of Process Director. The whole point of it is to automate processes, but we think of processes usually in terms of automating a single process. You have a approval process, and what you want to happen is to configure your approval process so that all of the user activities start when they're supposed to start. Users get automated notifications, they complete their tasks. When they complete their tasks, any successor tasks are started automatically. And you generally don't have to pay much attention to the process after you have configured it and tested it because, well, it just works. And over time, while occasionally things might go awry in a specific instance here or there, for the most part, you're confident that every time someone submits a form, the process will get started automatically, and you'll follow the process that you've configured. Now, how processes started might also need to be automated, and that's one of the things that we'll be concentrating on today. Now, back in oldie times, the way that we started a process was we opened up the Windows scheduler and we created a BP util command to run a knowledge view that started a process for each row in the array of the knowledge view, or that would do some other command that would start our process automatically. I don't remember exactly how many years ago, probably, it was at least 5 or 7 years ago, we created the goal object. That sort of relieved us from the necessity of going into the Windows scheduler, which is really tedious. And of course, if you're a cloud customer, you can't go into the Windows scheduler. Well, I guess you can. You can download the utilities and run them locally and run off of your local Windows scheduler to call a BP util command. But you certainly can't do it on the server, which is where you would prefer to run your BP util commands out of Windows scheduler. Plus, you have to know how to use Windows scheduler. And unless you're an IT person, and look, I've been an IT person for 30 years and I barely know how to run Windows scheduler. So that's not the optimal solution, but the goal is way better because it exists inside Process Director, and you can run it inside Process Director, and you can run it on a scheduled basis, and it can start your processes off automatically via the goal. Well, that's important because it makes doing an automated restart of a process way easier. We're going to leverage that today in talking about our sample app. Now, our sample app is a book check-in process. We'll talk more about that in detail, but it is not uncommon to have a process like, submitting an HR complaint or some sort of personnel action or some sort of suggestion or any checking out any type of equipment. There may be any number of use cases where I have an initial process that needs to run. And then at some point in the future, 30 days, 3 months, a year, 6 months, whatever it may be, I need to do a follow-up on that process that has already been completed. So, for example, somebody puts in some sort of complaint, and that complaint gets handled however your organization decides that it gets handled if somebody submits a complaint form for whatever the complaint might be. And then maybe in 90 days, you're going to want to go back and follow up on that complaint. One thing that you could do, although you really don't want to, is to have a process that includes a 30-day or 90-day or 1-year wait task. And so this wait task just sits there ticking along in the background forever or at least until your due date is reached. And then the wait task cancels itself and it moves on to the rest of your process. The drawback to this, and there are two main ones, is that number one, this wait task keeps the process active for the entire 3 months, or in the case of our example today, we're going to go for a year. So I could keep this process running for an entire year and it constantly shows up as a running process. Now, if you're a system administrator and you want to look at what processes are running on your system, the last thing that you want to see are 200 or 300 processes that are in a year-long wait task, but you can't do anything with them because you've got to wait for an entire year before that process will reach the follow-up point and it completes. That's inconvenient from a management perspective. It's also, just from a technical perspective, not a great idea. I mean, if you're going to have, let's say, a 90-day follow-up on some sort of complaint submission, well, you've got to have the reasonable expectation then that nothing is ever going to happen to that server in the next 90 days. There won't be some sort of power loss or shutdown or some internet outage, whatever it might be, some black swan event that is just going to end all of your running processes, whether you want them to or not. And if that happens, well, then all of these processes that have been stuck there in that wait task, they're done. And you've lost all those processes and you have to go back in and manually restart them because there's no real bulk method of going in and trying with a SQL statement or whatever to just magically restart all these processes. So you have a couple of risks there. Number one is sort of the managerial risk of having a whole bunch of processes running all of the time, which kind of clutters up your ability to easily see what's going on your system at any given time and manage it. And of course, number two, you have the technical risk of something might happen over the next 90 days, or as in the case of our example today, a year, where you really wouldn't want a wait task running for a year. Ideally, what you want to do is have the process start, finish, and then magically get restarted somehow 90 days or 6 months or a year down the road. And so that is what we are going to discuss today. We have an application where we're going to check out some books, and we can keep those books for a year checked out. And then after a year, we want to kick off another process. We want to prompt the user to check those books in. And it's going to be a completely different process from the checkout process, but we are going to use the same form. And so we're going to set this up to do a book checkout process that will allow us to check out a book. It's going to wait for a year, although we will not be keeping the webinar going for a year, so we'll have to play fast and loose with some dates here. And after the end of that year, it'll automatically restart a process and prompt people to check them in, give them the appropriate notifications and what have you, and then they'll be assigned a task to check their book in. So before we get started with this, I have to tell you that this is going to be, well, it's complex. That's not the problem. The problem is that there are a lot of objects that have to be created here, and I don't have the time to create all those objects. We have a maximum of 2 hours, and it would just be too difficult to create all of this stuff from scratch. So everything is already pre-built. Now, happily, I, of course, have a completed version of this app, which is what we'll be looking at and demonstrating today. If you want a copy of it, I'll be happy to send it to you. But what we are going to do is discuss in detail how this restarting of a process, which I think is actually a bad term. It's not really restarting a process. How we're going to take an original process and use it as the base for a new process that we're going to start to do a follow-up, or as in this case, to do a check-in of an item that has already been checked out. On the checkout side, there's not a lot that we have to worry about. There is, of course, a checkout notification. It's an email notification. It just notifies your user that they have checked an item out and tells them what their due date is going to be, confirms the title of, in this case, the book that they've checked out, who checked it out, and when it's due back. So it's a real simple email template. There is actually no task for this notification. This is really an informational notification, so there is no link to a form. There's no link to an activity. You kicked off the process whenever you submitted the form to check out the book in this particular case. I don't think I have to keep saying in this example or in this particular case. I think I've made it clear. It's a book checkout. So I'm going to try to eliminate that explanatory language from the rest of the webinar. So this tells you that you've checked out the book. And by the way, that's all this process does. The process itself is really super simple. It just has a checkout notification that sends you the email template that we've looked at so far. The reason for this is it doesn't really matter what the checkout process is. I could have made it very, very complex for no purpose at all. The only purpose that we have, excuse me, is to have this initial process that runs, to have this initial form. We're going to need certainly the form a little bit later whenever we do our follow-up. But usually there is some process associated with either, the equipment checkout or a complaint that you have submitted, whatever it might be. We don't really care what that process is. There just is one because we're going to submit the form and we're going to have our process. And in this case, the process just sends out the checkout notification. Now, the form itself is a little bit different. Let's take a look at the form's design. There's nothing super complex about the form for the first three fields. Whenever I check out my book, I'm going to put in the title. Need to put in the checkout date, which I think actually gets placed in here automatically. So I don't even have to fill that out. No, it doesn't get filled out automatically. I have no default value. Maybe I have a set form data or something. I'm not sure. We'll set the checkout date. Oh, wait, you know what? I might not have it set automatically because I'm going to need to put in some fake checkout dates. I'm going to need to put in a checkout date that's more than a year old. So I've got this checkout date. On a regular form, you would probably just set this to the form submit date so that it would just automatically fill it out. I mean, you might not even show it to the user, at least not the field. You might show them the value like we often do for request submissions where we have the submitter's name and the submission date. And we set the default value of those fields just to put in whoever the current user is and whatever the form submit date is, which is generally the current date. And we show disabled fields as text. And so the text appears on the form, but there's no control to show them. And you would probably do that in this particular case on a real world form. In my case, I have to go in and change checkout dates, as you'll see in a little bit. So we're going to have to keep that set. Then we have our checked out by. That's just a regular old user picker. In this case, it is put in there automatically because I'll be the person who checks it out. So it might as well put my name in automatically. I'm not going to be editing this. Again, in a real application, this would probably be disabled as well, and you would show that as text. So you wouldn't need that field. What you do need as part of the fundamental architecture to make this all work are some status fields. Now, I've made them visible and I've made them checkboxes, largely so that I can go in and manually change the status of items. So if I want to find something that was checked out earlier and I want to restart that process by changing the status, I can click these checkboxes, and I have two. Sometime in the future, after I've submitted this form and I've completed my checkout process, I'm going to need to have some way of knowing what items, in this particular case, have been checked out. And so I need a checked out checkbox so that if it is checked, I know that the item is still checked out. And since that is so, then I need to prompt my follow up a year from now when the book becomes due and I have to turn it back in. I have a second field on here called check in prompted. I'm going to use this field to ensure that if I run, 'cause we're going to run this from a goal. So when my goal runs, I'm going to want to check to be sure that not only is a book checked out, but that the user hasn't already been prompted to check the book in. Because whenever my goal runs, I'm going to be kicking off a process for this particular checkout. And if that process is already running, well, I don't want to replicate that by kicking off another process for the same book and the same user. They've already been notified. The check-in has already been prompted. So I need to be sure that if this is checked, I don't count this as one of the overdue books because I don't want to have multiple processes running to remind people to check in the same book because that means they're just going to have to open up several different processes and recheck it in over and over and over. We obviously don't want to do that. So I've got to have two pieces of data as a minimum, and depending on the nature of your process, you might need more. But I need at least two pieces of data. I need to grab books that are checked out, and I have to know if that checkout has already been prompted for a user before so I don't repeat it. So I got to know those two things. In this case, these are check boxes. They both appear on the form so that I can manually change them back and forth. In a real application, these would probably be hidden status fields. And those hidden status fields would just be automatically changed on your form via the use of a set form data on either the form or the process timeline at the appropriate time. In our particular case, the process timeline has a set form data that changes the check-in prompted value whenever the process gets kicked off. We'll look at that a little bit later. So what I really need on my book checkout form are A, the data I need to actually complete the initial process, and B, any of the status fields that I'm going to need to be able to track how the follow-up works. And so in the case of this example, that requires that I have these 5 fields on the form, and I have winnowed it down to really kind of the minimum information that I need. Actually, the one piece of information on this form that I do not need to make the process work at all is the book title. Now, I don't care what the book is titled. It could be anything. I do need a checkout date because the checkout date is what I'm going to use to determine whether the book is due or not. I'm going to have to do a calculation based on the checkout date to see if this book has been checked out for more than a year. Obviously, I need to know who checked the book out because that's the person who is going to receive the notification that their book is overdue and that they need to check it back in. And I need the 2 status fields as we've previously explained. So of the 5 fields on this form, the book title is only there so I know which one I'm looking at. But all of the other 4 fields on this form actually are used in one way or another for the process that is going to get kicked off after a year. So there we go. Those are our checkout items. They don't do much other than provide the foundation for our follow-up process, which is our check-in process. Now, as I said, this is going to run a goal. However, we can't make the goal yet because there's some infrastructure that needs to be created before we can continue that goal. So we're going to have to build that infrastructure first. So let's start off with the things that nothing depends on, that are just part of the infrastructure, that'll just be part of the process. Let's just start with the check-in notification. I've winnowed this down so that it's pretty simple. I have book check-in required, which I thought that was heading one. And I think I've done a bad thing here. So we're going to fix this up just a little bit so that it makes a little more sense. So there we go. There is my book check-in required heading. I've got the task instructions. We'll take a look at those in a second. This is the task instructions that are configured on the user task that will prompt this notification, my check-in task. I've got the information, the book title, checkout date, checkout user. That's just the text information or the checkout information from the form. And then I have a hot link control. And as always, whenever we drop in a hot link control, or well, most of the time when we drop a hot link control in on an email template, we just set it to the email URL system variable as the URL to send it to, and whatever text we need for the hyperlink that will appear in the email when it gets sent, which in this case is complete the check-in. So I've got this very simple notification with the instructions, with the item that it concerns, and then a link to my check-in. That's pretty standard, so I don't think we need to go into a lot of detail on how that works. Next, we're going to need a timeline that is going to run on all of the items that have been checked out. So there's a couple of things that we need to take a look at here on this timeline. So after I check a book out, a year later, that book needs to be checked in. This is the timeline that is going to run to check the book in. Now, this timeline has to be configured in a particular way to make the timeline work properly. First, if we look in the options section, it does not have a form for timeline. In fact, if we look in the Books Due folder, there is no form at all. The reason that we're doing this is because we are going to kick this process off in an automated fashion from a knowledge view. And we have a knowledge view that we're going to look at in a little bit that is scheduled to start this process for each row in the knowledge view. Now that knowledge view will return all of the books that are due, and it'll have however many rows I decide it has when I go back in and edit some of the form instances. And for each row, however many it is, 2, 3, whatever, it's going to kick off this process. Now that knowledge view returns form instances of the book checkout form. So whenever the knowledge view invokes this process, which again has no form for timeline set, it doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is it's going to attach a copy of the book checkout form to this process timeline as a timeline attachment. So the knowledge view itself is going to supply our form instance. If I were to set a form instance on form for timeline, that would be the default form instance, and it would want to make that form instance the default instance for the timeline. The trouble is, it's going to create it, and I don't want to create an extra copy of the book checkout form. And I certainly don't want to have a entirely new form. And I certainly could, but then I would have to go through the rigmarole of running a copy form data to copy data from the original form to the new form. Then I'd have to set the new form as the default form for the timeline. I don't need that level of complication. I can simply leave this blank. And in doing so, whenever I invoke the timeline from the from the knowledge view, it's just going to attach a copy of the original form anyway, which is great. And that takes us to what I have to do to make that original form work. The first thing I have to do is I have to set the original form via a form actions process timeline activity as the default instance for the timeline. When this process gets invoked, despite the fact that the book checkout form is automatically attached to the process timeline, it does not have a default form set, as we just saw. I've got to tell it where the default form is. So if I didn't run this form actions activity, the proper form would still be attached to this timeline, but it wouldn't know that it was the default form. So we're going to make it know that it's the default form by running this process timeline activity and setting the book checkout form as the default form instance for this timeline. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to change one of the fields on the form. So I have a second activity that is a custom task activity that runs the set form data custom task. Technically, I don't have to do this. Technically, I could just delete this activity entirely, and I could either at the end of the set original form to default activity or at the very beginning of the check bookend activity, I could use the built-in set form data. So I could say, set original form to default on task end. Sorry about the little CSS thing that we're seeing here. Should be able to read that text, and these drop downs are a little too small. I know that I have a fix ticket in for that, so please ignore it. But I could, at the end of my at the end of an activity, I could just run a set form data action inside the process timeline, and I could accomplish the same thing, and I wouldn't need to create a separate activity, and I wouldn't need to invoke the custom task. I am doing it intentionally, however, for, in this case, just ease of management when I come in later. If I create my own activity that does the set form data, and this is the way that I do it, even though technically I could use the set form data section of the timeline itself to actually make the set form data occur when I want it to occur. When you just open up the timeline, it's not immediately obvious that you're doing that. And also for training purposes, just to make it explicit, I have created the set form data, and the set form data doesn't do much except take that check-in prompted checkbox and check it. So the purpose of this is to set that checkbox as true so that we know that, okay, I've started a process for this particular form instance. It's running. The user is now going to be notified. The prompt process is running. We're no longer going to count this based on the value in that check-in prompted, as we'll see in a few minutes. We're no longer going to count this as an overdue book. It's already in the process of check-in, so we don't need to mess with it again. Once that set form data is concluded, finally, we reach our book check-in activity, which is a user activity. Now, the reason why that we have the checkout user on the form and that we're filling it with the name of the current user is, remember, we don't know who this task needs to be assigned to, so we can't hard code any sort of user assignment for the check-in. It always has to go to the person who was listed as the checkout user. So in this case, we're going to use the from form field participant, and we're going to use that checkout user field. That's why it's a user picker on the form. So we always know who the user is. and it will just find that user and it will assign this check book in task to that user. So this is a fairly straightforward timeline that simply governs our one task that we're going to kick off to have a user check the book in. And with the configuration that we've given it, we can use the original form instance of the book checkout form that was used to check the book out. And we can use that same form instance to check the book back in. So we actually have the same form instance that is now associated with two separate process timeline activities, our checkout timeline and our notify book due timeline. This is going to cause some, uh, this is going to require some more attention to detail whenever you are configuring a knowledge view. If you want to configure a knowledge view to see what books have been checked out, what books have been checked in, because you are now going to have to specify which of the forms you want to see by specifying which of the process timelines you want to return the form instance for. So if otherwise, if you just return the form and all timeline instances, it's going to return two rows. It's going to return one row for the form with the checkout timeline and one row for the same form instance for the notify book due timeline. So if you don't want it to do that, then whenever you create your knowledge view on the properties tab of the knowledge view where you can specify a process, you would need to specify the correct process to ensure that it only returns the forms that are like in that process, running that process, have completed that process, whatever it is that you're attempting to do with your knowledge view. Just keep in mind that what we are doing is associating the same form instance with two different timeline instances, not just two different timeline instances, but two largely unrelated timeline instances. So if you are going to want to run any management K-views on this form instance, just keep in mind that depending on what the K-view information is that you're trying to return, you're going to have to appropriately filter your K-view to ensure that you return the form instance that's associated with the correct process timeline instance. Great. So now we know two things. We know how the book gets checked out, and we know what form is going to be used for that. And we also know how the form is going to be checked back in, or at least the process that will be used to check that form back in, because we've seen both the process timeline and the notification for that, and we know we're using the same form. So the main building blocks of the applications themselves are done. I don't know whether I would consider this one application or two separate applications. I guess it depends on how you look at it, but the basic objects that will govern how the processes work are done. Now what we need to do is figure out how we are going to get that check-in done. Like I said, we're going to do it with a goal, but we can't build that goal without building a couple of process timelines. So rather than talking, I'm kind of reflecting in my mind how I want to talk about this. I think the next thing I need to talk about in logical order, now that we have the basic process director objects, forms, and timelines, let's talk about the prompt book check-in knowledge view. This is the knowledge view that is going to kick off the check-in processes. This is the knowledge view that is going to be invoked by our goal when we finally create our goal. We can't create our goal unless this knowledge view exists, so we have to create it next. On the Properties tab, We're looking at the book checkout form. We're going to have some filters to pull back just the forms that we want, but we're looking at the book checkout form. And when this runs, we need to select a process to run on each object that gets returned by the knowledge view. The knowledge view returns 3 rows, then I need to invoke 3 different processes, one for each row. And the process I'm going to invoke is the one that we just looked at, the notify book due timeline. So this is the knowledge view that is going to determine what books are overdue, and based on that, what check-in processes need to be prompted. Another thing to keep in mind, this is what invokes the process of the notify book due timeline. Now, most of the time, whenever we kick off a process, we kick it off with a form submission. Indeed, that's how our checkout process works. We submit the book checkout form. It automatically starts the checkout timeline. The checkout timeline sends us our notification. All well and good. But in this case, the process is being started from a knowledge view. There is no form to submit. There is no default form. We cannot run this notify book due timeline on its own. It is not a standalone timeline. If we were to try to run it on its own, it would fail. And the reason it would fail is because there is no form for this timeline. Actually, I say it would fail. It wouldn't know what we were trying to do. There's no form for this timeline. So when we start it, the very first thing that happens, set original form to default, it's going to do it, but it's going to give me a blank form. And it's then going to set the checkout to that form. So far, so good. And then it's going to look for the task assignee. And because we have invoked this by itself, and it's just running by itself, there's no form submitter. So there's nothing in the checkout user field. Therefore, that means there is no user for this user activity. So the user activity will just administratively cancel itself as not needed. And we'll just end up with this extra copy of the book checkout form and an extra instance of the notify book timeline that didn't do anything other than create a new blank instance of the form, check a checkbox, and then end itself. So this is not a standalone timeline. It is configured specifically in a way that enables it to be invoked from the prompt book check-in knowledge view. That's why it is configured the way it is configured. And by invoking it from this knowledge view, we're going to get the proper data to each timeline instance whenever they're invoked. Now, on the Configure tab, the way this is going to work is I'm going to have to change my knowledge view results. Now, most of the time, whenever you create a knowledge view, you want to see the results, and it's always got displayed in grid set up as the knowledge view results. Well, how are we going to show you the knowledge view results? Well, to show me, you generally have to display it in grid. There are several other options. We can export the knowledge view to Excel automatically, or export it to CSV automatically, or we can, as in this case, run a process. There's also export to database and also export to calendar. Using calendar invokes the calendar KView. I've got an entire webinar on how calendar KViews work, but we are going to invoke the process to make this knowledge view work, which means if I run this knowledge view, it's not ever going to show me anything. Well, it will show me something, but it's not going to show me any data. If I run this knowledge view, it's going to say, hey, I'm just going to start a process. I'm not going to tell you what processes there are. I mean, I will tell you how many I'm going to start, but I'm not going to tell you anything because I'm not going to display this knowledge view. This configuration for the knowledge view is designed to work in the background without the knowledge view ever being viewed. Now, should you do what I have just done and try to run it manually, process director will say, okay, buddy, sure, I'll run. I'm going to start processes. You sure that's what you want me to do? So this is more like a warning or confirmation box to whether I want to start the process. Now, in this case, it's going to start for 0 items because I don't have anything checked out at the moment. So if I run a process on these items, it will immediately tell me that the process was started for 0 items. So I've accomplished nothing. But that setting on the knowledge view is very important. Now, until you change the knowledge view results to run a process, and then you go in and update the knowledge view, and I'm playing a dangerous game by updating a knowledge view that I know already runs. So I hope I haven't inadvertently made some change that's going to ruin things. You've got to set this knowledge view results, and you have to update immediately. And because until you do that, the select process to run on each object property will not display on the properties page. So really the way that you have to configure this in the real world is you've got to create the knowledge view. It'll take you to the properties tab. You'll set the form associated with knowledge view. Then you're going to have to go to the configure tab, change the knowledge view results to run a process, and then you're going to have to update the knowledge view. Only after you update the knowledge view will you then be able to go back to the properties tab and then select the process to run on each object, because only then will it be visible to you on the tab. This causes some confusion. We might make an argument that there are some things that maybe we can make an argument that we should move this knowledge view results back over onto the properties tab. The only problem is run a process isn't the only thing that happens here. For example, if I set this to export to Excel, I really shouldn't do this because I hope I'm not breaking everything, but I believe I can reconfigure it. Okay, I've updated it. I said export to Excel. Okay, fine. Now, when I go back, I have 2 different properties showing up to select the Excel template. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Don't know what I clicked. Oh, it's that stupid helpful pop-up that shows up. That I could not hate that more. That's just one of the many reasons I hate Edge. However, my personal bugaboos with browsers aside, those 2 properties only show up if you have exported to Excel selected here. So whenever you're creating this, it's a rather more convoluted process. Now, let me update. Let me go back and reconfigure this. Select a process to run on each object. Now I got to reselect my notify book due timeline. Now I'm going to update it again. Hopefully I haven't screwed everything up. However, the interaction between these 2 tabs can be a little confusing and to me a little irritating. The problem is that whenever you change this stuff, you get all of these extra properties. Like if I go to Excel, I get all of these extra properties that show up that don't show up if I have it like displayed in grid. They all disappear. So you got this sort of dynamic thing happening here. We've decided to put it here on the configure tab, but it does mean that this tab changes dynamically based on changes you make on the configure tab. So there's a little back and forth that you got to do here to make this thing work. Once you've got it configured to run a process and you've gone back and you have set the process to your, in this case, notify book TL. Now we can go into our options. The options here are pretty much the standard ones that we would always set for almost any knowledge view. We're going to turn everything off but form instances. Especially on a knowledge view like this, it's never going to be displayed. So I never need to worry about users will be able to create things. It's never going to be displayed. So display action icons or allow these actions are completely useless. and we're only pulling back form instances. We are only pulling back form instances because we need to transfer those form instances to the new process. So all of this other stuff needs to be unchecked as well, because we only want to return form instances specifically. So everything is unchecked on this tab except for form instances. That's intentional. Columns tab. Um, I started to go in and make some changes to this, and then I realized nobody's ever going to see this. The columns are immaterial. So I actually went through and started to change the name. So I changed this column name, and then I realized, I guess I saved after I changed it, but then I realized I don't have to do anything on the columns tab. This is never going to be displayed. This is not a knowledge view for display. So even though I changed the name for the column name, you will note that these are the 5 default columns in the knowledge view, because we don't care, because this knowledge view does one thing. It kicks off processes. Nobody's ever going to look at it. And so, I mean, it is conceivable that I might run it manually just to kick off the processes manually if I felt that was necessary, as we saw previously. But in general, I'm not even going to do that. This is all going to happen automatically. It's always going to run in the background. What I do have to care about are the filters for the form instances that I want to return. So I've got my 2 check boxes and I've got my checkout date. So as I explained earlier, for a book to be considered due or overdue, whatever verbiage you want to use, the checked out checkbox has to be checked because the book has to be checked out. The checkout date has to be however long ago it needs to be. In this case, it's 365. We're going to come back and talk about that operator in a second. But we have our checkout date. We've got to evaluate that. So it has to have been checked out, has to have been checked out more than a year ago, 365 days. And the check-in prompted cannot be checked. Remember, we don't want to run a process if I've already kicked off the process to prompt the check-in. So I got 2 status fields, and then I've got the checkout date to specify the due date. I think the checkout and check-in prompted checkboxes and the conditions that we set up are very clear and very understandable. Checked out has to be checked. Check-in prompted has to be unchecked. It's the date where it gets a little tricky. It's a verbiage problem. I don't know how to fix a verbiage problem, but because of this problem, people assume that the operator they have to use is exactly the opposite one of the one that they want to use. The checkout date has to be less than or equal to days ago 365. What this makes you think is that it has to have been checked out less than 365 days ago. But that is exactly the opposite of what this condition actually tells you. Days ago is where I think it all comes crashing down. Days ago is a system variable. And what days ago? Well, days ago is a formatter for a system variable. And what it returns is the date, whatever it might have been, 365 days ago. What we think is happening here when we see this verbiage is that it says, okay, what is today? And then let me count back 365 days to see, because this is what people normally want to do. They want to set it to greater than or equal to 365. I have no idea what horrible threats are impending, but the dog does have some idea, and so he's being a little barky. I apologize. So what we would naturally think, if that's how it worked, if it was, let's take today and then let's go back 365 days and ensure that this is greater than 365 days ago. But that's not what this does. We want it to be less than or equal to what the date was 365 days ago. So what is going to happen if we were to run this today? What is, I have to look to see what the date is. It's the 16th of January. It's the 16th of January. The value that is going to be returned by days ago 365 is 16 January 2024. So that's a date value that gets returned. And what I actually want is to find a date that is less than or earlier than, that's what less than means whenever we're doing dates. I want to find a date that is earlier than 16 January 2024. So it's not taking today and counting back 365 days and seeing if it falls within a time span. That's not what this does. It returns a specific date, January 16th, 2024, and I am using the less than or equal to operator because this book is due if the due date is less than or earlier than or equal to January 16th, 2024. So using days ago is great. I love it, but you have to remember it's returning a fixed date value. It is not looking back over a 365-day time span to see whether your date falls into that time span. It's asking whether your date is earlier than or later than whatever the date was 365 days ago. So this is a little bit of a confusing thing, the way that it is set up. I get lots of tech support tickets about this. About, hey, I said I wanted it less than 5 days ago, and it's showing me all the wrong stuff. Yeah, change the operator from less than, or from greater than to less than, and things will work just fine. So that's the one tricky thing about these particular filters. But once you've got that set, we now have the ability to invoke this knowledge view via a goal. That's where we're ultimately heading to. However, we can't get there yet because for our goal to work, we only want it to run if there are books due. If there are no books due, then we don't want to invoke this knowledge view. There's no reason to run it if there are no books due. So we have to figure out first, do we need to run the knowledge view? Well, that means that we're going to need some sort of condition that we can apply to the goal. The way that we're going to apply that condition is via the books due knowledge view. The books due knowledge view is a more traditional knowledge view. And I was playing with it yesterday, and I think I broke it because I expected to see something slightly different on the checkout. Although I guess it doesn't matter. Even with this configuration, it's going to work. I have two options here. And I think I deleted one of my options. I don't think it's important because let's talk about this in a minute. Let's go back and just start from the beginning on this knowledge view. We'll go back and we'll talk about that filter issue later because there are some things we need to think about. I'd rather get the simple part of the configuration out of the way. This is not a very impressive knowledge view. It returns instances of the book checkout form. It shows those instances. It displays them in a grid, although for the most part, you're never going to look at them. It only returns form instances again, And on the columns, well, I only have a name column here. There's not much that you're going to see in this Knology. Now, you can run it. It doesn't affect anything if you run it. There are no records that match right now, so it doesn't return any records. That's fine. That's exactly what I want it to do. And the reason it doesn't return any records is because of this filter. Now, there are two ways of going about this. Now, I believe the way that I originally had this set up was with the same filters that I had on the Notify Book Due timeline. So I believe not an or, sorry. Let me get rid of that. I believe what I originally had was the same set of filters. And I think I remember now why I deleted it. But let me show you two possible scenarios. Right now, I do not have the third form field here, which is the check-in prompted form field, set to, I think in this case, it's supposed to be not checked. I could do this and it would work just fine. However, based on the way that I configured the goal, my goal value is going to be misleading if I do it this way. You would think that, okay, this is the way I want to have it set up so that my filters on this knowledge view, which the books due goal is going to use to determine whether I have books outstanding or not. This needs to be the same as the Notify Book Due timeline. So if I have 3 books that are ready, that need to be turned back in, this knowledge view will return those 3 books. And then this knowledge view, the Notify Book Due timeline, will return the same 3 books as well. Now, that's not entirely fallacious reasoning. However, whether check-in has been prompted or not, if the book was checked out more than 365 days ago and the checked out checkbox is still checked, that book is still due, irrespective of whether or not the check-in has been prompted. I mean, I could have run this knowledge view yesterday and it returned 3 books. And if I set it to check-in prompted equals not checked, I might run it today and it would return 2 books. Or maybe it would return no books. The thing is, if the 3 books that I did yesterday have not yet been checked in, those books are still outstanding. They're still due. So if I'm going to create my goal, as I am, to determine whether I have books that are due or not, then I really don't want to have these filters exactly match the Notify Book Due timeline. If I turn this off and I get rid of that property, now, as long as the book is still checked out and it's more than 365 days old, I have books that are due. Those books that are due may or may not have already prompted the end user who checked them out to check them back in. But irrespective of whether the checkout process has been started or not on those books are still due. So the question that I have to ask is, for the purposes of creating my goal, do I want to show do I want to ensure that all, if I have any books checked out at all, that are past their due date. Any. Do I want that counted as I have books due? Or do I only want to count, do I only want to count books that have not had the check-in prompted? So what I've done is I've decided, you know what? I want to know how many books I have checked out, irrespective of whether or not the end users have been notified. I don't care. As long as that book is still checked out, it counts as a book due, and I want it to show up in the goal as a book due. If so, then this is the filter that I want for this specific knowledge view. The purpose of this knowledge view is to determine the number of books that I have due, and I have to create it in order to run a business value off of it that returns the number of books due. The sole purpose for this knowledge view is just to return that limited number of books due, if any, so that in the due date check knowledge view or business value, I can run that knowledge view. Now, this business value uses the books due knowledge view as a data source. As you can see, it runs as if it were me, so it's executing it under my user context. I'm not returning any data other than the number of knowledge view rows. And so I've called this property books, and it will return me the number of knowledge view rows in this books due knowledge view. Now, the books due knowledge view is just a normal knowledge view. As we saw earlier, I can use that just to open anytime that I want and look at it and just see how many books are due that meet the filters that we talked about a minute ago. In addition to that, which makes life a little easier for me as a manager, anytime if I ever want to go and look and see what our status is, how many items are due to be checked in, I can use that knowledge view. But in the meantime, I've got a business value that uses it. And this business value is also going to be how my goal determines what happens when the goal runs. We've had to build all of these objects just to get us to the goal, books due. And this is the goal that makes all the magic happen. We just can't build it until we build these other 4 objects, the 2 knowledge views, the timeline, and the business value. But now that we have built them, we have all the pieces that we need to make our goal work. So let me open up all of the properties so we can see how this goal is configured. Under the execution options, didn't change any of the default options. We just want to run all actions whose conditions are met and execute them, when they're met, and all of them that are met. That's fine. We don't really have to mess around here, other than to realize that I am calling a knowledge view. I am running the prompt book check-in knowledge view. So I do, since I'm executing a knowledge view, I do need to provide the user context, which in this case is me, so that that knowledge view runs properly. But the reason why the execute actions and execute property in this particular instance don't matter is that I only have 2 conditions, both of which are mutually exclusive. Only one of these things can ever be true. So I don't really have to care too much about execution options, other than because I am invoking a knowledge view, I have to set the user context for the knowledge view that I'm going to invoke. So my first condition, I'm actually evaluating the due date check business value, which returns just the number of rows in the books due knowledge view. And so it's going to return 0 to n as the number of rows. If the number of rows is anything greater than 0, then I have books due, which again takes me back to what does this goal need to report? I've decided what I want it to report is books due irrespective of whether the users have been prompted or not. So if I had 3 users prompted yesterday and 2 users prompted today, it wouldn't matter. I would still want to know that I had 5 books. I said 5 and then held up 4 fingers. I have 5 books that are due. And since I have 5 books that are due, I have books due. So I'm going to set this result. Then I'm going to use run knowledge view. And that's where I run the prompt book check-in action. The prompt book check-in knowledge view will return however many rows of books are checked out but have not yet been notified, and will send the appropriate notifications to those users that those books are now overdue and they need to be returned. Now, if I run the goal again and due date check returns 0 knowledge view rows, well, then nothing much is going to happen. I'm going to set my result to nothing due, but that's all I'm going to do. Nothing else is going to be invoked. Nothing else needs to happen. I don't have anything due. Now, while I was playing around yesterday, we obviously had some books due at some point yesterday. And then the last time I ran it, there was nothing due. And there's nothing due intentionally because I checked everything back in. So we're going to evaluate our goal now. And when we do, well, not much happens. The goal value didn't even change. Nothing is still due. So far, so good. So now let's play around with the application itself and see what happens here. I've got some existing book checkout forms, but I need to create a new one if for no other reason so that you can see the book the book checkout property works before we get to the book check-in property. So we'll probably come back in here. We'll make some changes to some of these books so that we get varying numbers of books due. But for now, let's check out a book. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the book checkout form from here. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a book title. And my checkout date will be, I'm going to go ahead and do it today. And I'm checking the book out. Now, I'm doing this manually again, so I can go back into existing form instances and play around with them. Normally, this would just happen automatically and we wouldn't see these fields, but that's fine. I've got my book. Used to be a big Isaac Asimov fan as a kid. And I'm going to go ahead and submit my form. It just occurred to me that I always turn off Outlook, and in this case, I actually need it. So let me open up a new version of training over here. And I'm doing this because I want to be in this workspace. Yes, for my new version. So I'm in 2 separate workspaces on the training server. So I have no tasks assigned to me, and I need to open up Outlook. I usually close it so that Outlook notifications don't pop up on the screen while we're live. But in this case, I need something to pop up on the screen. I need to see that. That is my notification for my book checkout. The book is iRobot. It's set for 1/16/2025 when I checked it out, checked out by me, and the due date is 1/16/2026. So that worked normally. It does occur to me, I didn't tell you how that happens whenever we looked at the email template. Now that I see it, that is a calculated value. Let me show you how I did it real quick. So checkout process is done. By the way, I got my notification that says, hey, you checked this book out. Okay, great. I've checked the book out. I know that my timeline is working and I've got a copy of the form. But let's go back to this checkout notification real quick and take a look at it. Right down here. Now, these are all system variables. right? So these are all form field system variables. I got book title, I've got checkout date, checkout user, and I got checkout date again, but I've got this trippy little modifier on the checkout date, which is days equals 365. Anytime that you have a date time system variable, you can advance the date or the times simply by using the days or hours or minutes uh, modifier to just advance the date that gets returned. It's kind of like a, well, it actually kind of performs a date diff behind the scenes. So if I have any valid date, so checkout date is a date time picker, it's obviously a date field. The system variable returns a date value. And so with any date system variable or date time system variable, the same things, any date time system variable, I can just advance the date by however many increments I want, simply by, as I've done here, dropping in days equals 365. So that will just automatically count to 365 days in the future and will show that date to me. And so that's how we end up with 1/16/2026 as the date shows up in the email template. So it would have been a little less confusing, I think, had I covered that initially, but unfortunately I didn't. So I apologize for having to play a little catch up. Great. So I've got my forms. I've checked them in. Here's my new form, my iRobot form that I have, or my iRobot book that I have checked out. So if I run books due now, we shouldn't notice anything. Nothing should be different at all. My goal value still shows up as nothing due. So, we're great. That's working exactly as we expected. But we have all of these books checked out, and sooner or later, they are going to reach their due dates. So let's take I don't know, let's grab three of them. So this book was checked out on, well, it says 1/14/2025. Let's change that to 1/14/2024. We'll ensure checked out is still checked out, or is still checked, and check-in prompted is unchecked. So we're good with that one. We'll go with, did I just do The Hobbit? Yes, I just did The Hobbit. So let's do Jaws. And that has check-in prompted. So we're going to switch that back to checked out. That's 1/1/2024. So we should be okay there. And now we're going to take our iRobot and we are going to change that checkout date to, well, let's give us an extra day. 1/15/2025. And we'll save that. So assuming that I have edited those three form instances right, and let's refresh the forms. So that still says 1/15/2025. So let's go with 2024. Okay, let me refresh my knowledge view. Okay, so 1/15/2024, that was when it was checked out. This was checked out on 1/1, and this was checked out on 1/14/2024. And all of them are still marked as checked out, and none of them are marked with check-in prompted. Let me just be sure again. I've got that reconfigured right. All right, so what I should have, well, let's see. Let's run my books due KV and see what it returns. Oh, it returns 3 books. That's good. And if we run the notify book due TL and, oh, I'm sorry, prompt book check-in knowledge view, update and run, it should start the timeline for 3 items. Okay, I think I'm pretty confident that I've got that set up properly, which means that if we go into our knowledge view and we click evaluate now, I should get 3 email notifications and I should get 3 tasks assigned to me. So let's take a look. Well, here's books due. So it knows that I have books due. That's good. Let's go take a look at my task list. I have 3 check-in prompts in my task list that tells me I have to check some books in. And if I look over into Outlook, they are coming in slowly, but they are coming in. I now get my check-in prompts for each of the books. And whether I open them from my task list here or whether I open them from the form, it doesn't matter. It's going to take me to the same place. It's going to open up that form for me so that I can check that book back in. So this is The Hobbit. This is the first one that I grabbed. The book is still checked out, but I've been told I have to check it in. So I'm going to return it to the library and I'm going to uncheck the checked out checkbox. Well, I couldn't think of what that was called. And I'm going to complete that task. And one of the 3 tasks has now disappeared off my task list. One of my 3 running processes has now been reduced to 2. So I had 3 books checked out. I've now been prompted to check those 3 books back in. So let's go back to our goal and let's run it again and see what it says. Okay, it still says books due. Now it should, because if I run the books due knowledge view, I still have 2 outstanding books that are still due according to the criteria that I set up on that knowledge view. On notify book due, I keep going to that timeline. On prompt book check-in, it will start it for 0 items. The reason that it will start it for 0 items, even though I still have 2 books that are still checked out, is that notification checkbox. We've already been prompted, I say notification checkbox, that prompt for check-in checkbox on the form. That's been checked. Because it's been checked, I have nothing to do. So in this particular case, with my setup now, I have 3 books, or well, 2 now. I have 2 books that need to be checked in. Both of them have been notified of the check-in. Both of them have running tasks. So they're already happening. When I run this goal again, though, it's still going to say books due. And because it says books due, because the number of books that are getting returned by the due date check business value, which in turn is pulling the 2 records out of the books due knowledge view, it's still going to come back with a value of 2, which means I have books due. It's going to set the value, as it just did a minute ago, as books due, and it is going to run the prompt book check-in knowledge view. But I don't care that it's going to run the prompt book check-in knowledge view, because as we've seen, there is nothing for that knowledge view to do. It is going to invoke the process on 0 rows, which is to say the process is not going to be invoked at all, and the knowledge view will just end with no new processes being started. And so I get the best of both worlds in my view, or in my goal. It still tells me that I have books due, and I could still check if I wanted to via system variable or whatever. I could still check the due date check knowledge view to see how many books were still due, just to get the number back. Or I could open up the books due, that was the due date check business value. Or I could just open up the books due knowledge view and see that I still have 2 books, and I can see those 2 books. And if I want to see what's going on with these books, I mean, they are due, what is happening? And I open one up. Okay, it's still checked out. However, the check-in process has been started. And so the user has been told that they have to check these books in. Now I can go and write a personal note or pick up the phone and call the user or text them or whatever and say, hey, when are you going to get that book checked in, if I wanted to add a little extra fuel to that fire. But as we go through and we finish these processes, in fact, let me do it from here because this is what the end user will see. So we'll pull iRobot. We're going to check that back in. And then we'll take JAWS and we'll check that back in. Okay, cool. I have no tasks assigned to me. Everything has been done. So if I go back and I run my books due knowledge view, I should have just refreshed it since it was already displayed. Again, we're back to nothing. We have no books due, which means that when I run my goal and it evaluates, my goal value right now is nothing due, and my goal is working exactly as designed, and my follow-up has worked the way that I expect it to work due to the infrastructure that I've built here to make this goal revive the book checkout form, assign it to a new process, a follow-up process, in this case, the checkout, so that I could check the book out properly and do what I needed to do. All right, well, it doesn't look like there are any questions. So since that is so, this is kind of a weird one. There are too many objects for me to build from scratch to ensure I could get through it in 2 hours. But if I just look at the objects that are already built, it's hard to fill 2 hours with that. So that is all that I have to speak with you about today. I hope you have a great day for the balance of your day. Next week, we are going to do another rather complex setup. We are going to learn how to create a standalone process that we can call from any other process in the system to run as a sub process. So we have a standalone process, but we're also going to run it as a sub process for other processes. This is pretty common. Sometimes you have some very similar things that you run as a sub process, and you kind of have to, routinely call that process. And to make it work with your running application, you kind of have to rebuild it several times, even if it does very similar things. You don't really have to do that. You can actually make it an independent process that you can just call from anywhere. And that way you only have to build that sub process once, and then you can reuse it multiple times anywhere in your process director installation. And that's what we'll talk about next week. Have a great week. We will talk to you next week. Until then, so long.